Sandy McNulty, 27, was still reeling from the emotional wreckage of her recent divorce. It had only been a matter of weeks, and though the wounds were fresh, she tried to move forward. In a moment of vulnerability and hope, she signed up for Match.com, thinking maybe, just maybe, there was a chance at something new. Only a few days later, her inbox lit up with a message that stopped her cold. The subject line was simple: "You deserve better, Sandy McNulty." It wasn't just the fact that the sender used her full name. It was the eerie familiarity in the tone, the way the writer spoke like they knew her. Not in a general sense, but intimately. The message was long, nearly a full paragraph, rambling and oddly personal. The sender wrote about her recent breakup, acknowledging it with unnerving accuracy, and claimed that they had been watching her for a while. Watching and waiting. They said they understood her better than anyone else ever could. And most disturbing of all, they insisted the two of them would make a perfect couple. They asked her to respond, to share her thoughts, to open her heart again. But there was no name, no signature, just a shadowy sign-off and an attached file. It was an image. With a creeping sense of dread, Sandy opened the file and recoiled. It was a large, explicit photo of a man's genitalia. The shock hit like a slap. For a moment, she stood frozen, trying to process what she was seeing. Her first thought, her hope, was that maybe this was some sick prank from her ex. But the more she stared, the more it didn't make sense. The photo didn't match him. Physically, it wasn't even close. Still, she had to be sure. With a mix of anger and fear, she confronted her ex. His reaction was genuine, visibly confused, even a little disturbed. He denied it flatly, no hesitation, no defensiveness. And Sandy believed him. He wasn't the type. Not like this. Not calculated. Not cruel. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The emails didn't stop. They kept coming. Each one a little more unhinged, a little more angry. The tone turned sour, sharp and aggressive. The writer accused her of ignoring him, claimed she was making a mistake, that she was ungrateful. There was desperation in the words, but something darker too, something menacing just beneath the surface. She tried to tune it out, tried to live her life, but it was like being stalked by a ghost in the wires. Something she couldn't see, couldn't touch, but felt breathing down her neck with every new message that arrived. And then, one night, it escalated. Another email pinged into her inbox. Her stomach turned when she saw the subject, "Tonight." With trembling fingers, she opened it. There were no words this time, just an attachment, a photo. Sandy's breath caught in her throat. It was her house, taken from outside at night. The angle was unmistakable. Someone had stood across the street or just inside her yard. The photo showed the side of her house, dimly lit by the porch light she'd left on just an hour before. The timestamp matched. He'd been there, watching her close. Sandy's heart pounded in her chest. Her fingers moved fast now, shaking as she opened her email settings and blocked the address. She didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside made her flinch. She checked the locks 3 times, kept the lights on. But the messages, they stopped. That was the last she ever heard. No more emails, no more photos, no more late-night clicks into terror. To this day, she doesn't know who it was. Maybe it really was her ex putting on the performance of a lifetime. Or maybe it was someone else entirely. Someone who had slipped through the cracks of her life unnoticed until he decided to make himself known. Whoever it was, he knew her too well. And worse, he was close enough to take that picture. The kind of close you can only get when someone doesn't even know you're there. There was once a former Reddit user, long since deleted, who posted a story that lingered in the minds of everyone who read it. It wasn't long, just a single post, but the tension it carried, it never really left you. He described a chilling encounter that began with something deceptively simple, a text message. It came from an unknown number. No name, no contact photo, just a single line of text glowing on his screen. Check your email now. At first, he hesitated. It could have been a prank or spam or someone who had the wrong number. But something about the tone felt off, urgent, direct. Like the person on the other end knew he'd read it, like they were watching him right now. With a strange mix of curiosity and dread tightening in his chest, he opened his inbox. There it was. The subject line screamed in all caps, "Download this now." The sender's address was a string of random letters, no name, no reply. The body of the email was short, but horrifying in its precision. It was addressed to him directly, his full name, spelled correctly, middle name included. Then came his address, down to the apartment number, his phone number, the name of the street he grew up on. They knew everything. And below that unsettling message were 5 attachments. 4 image files, 1 executable file, named exactly like the subject line, "Download this now.exe." He opened the images, hands shaking slightly, his pulse thudding against the base of his throat. The first picture. It was his house, taken from the street, maybe even across the road. He recognized the way the porch light spilled out into the yard. It was recent, he was sure of it. The trash can was still at the curb, just like he'd left it the night before. The second photo. A woman, a young woman, standing somewhere outdoors, smiling faintly. It took him a few seconds to register what he was seeing, but when he did, the air left his lungs. It was his mother, decades younger, long before he was born, long before that photo had ever been scanned or uploaded. The third photo, it hit even harder. It was him, as a baby, bundled up in a soft blue blanket. One of those pictures that lived deep in a family album, never posted online. He couldn't even remember seeing this one before, but it was undeniably him. The fourth photo, a man. Someone he'd never seen before. Middle-aged, pale, gaunt. His hair was slicked back, thinning. His eyes somehow felt too wide, too direct. There was something deeply wrong about him, like he wasn't just staring through the camera, he was staring through the screen. There was no background in the image, just darkness behind the man's silhouette, as if he'd been photographed in a void. And then there was the last file, the one he didn't open, the .exe file. That part of the story always stuck with readers. He said his instinct screamed at him not to click it, not even to touch it. So he didn't. He closed the email and immediately contacted the police, showed them everything, the photos, the message, the file. What came of the investigation? He never said. And within that same month, his entire Reddit account disappeared. Post deleted, username deactivated, no follow-up, no trace, just silence. And no one ever found out what was inside that executable file. Some say it was malware. Others say it was a trap, a link to something far worse. But the ones who really believe the story, they think it was something personal, something meant only for him, something that would have changed everything the moment he clicked. And maybe something that's still out there, waiting. Father David had always found solace in routine. He was the sole priest of a modest church nestled in a quiet town upstate New York. His days were simple: morning prayers, afternoon calls to parishioners, and tending to the humble sanctuary that had stood for over a century. Part of his duties included managing a dedicated church email address. It was mostly quiet, occasional donation inquiries, scheduling confirmations, or kind messages from past visitors. It was a digital extension of his ministry, predictable, peaceful, until one day something different arrived. An email, no subject line, no sender name, just a blank entry in his inbox that stood out like a splinter. Curious, he clicked, and everything shattered. The screen instantly froze. A second later, it went black, then blue. The dreaded blue screen of death spread across his monitor like a wave of digital poison. The computer refused to boot back up. Every time he tried, it stalled, glitched, or restarted without warning. For nearly an hour, Father David sat in silence, praying under his breath, tapping keys with mounting frustration and unease. Finally, it restarted. But what came back wasn't his desktop. His files were gone. Everything, sermons, baptism records, church documents, family photos, wiped clean, as if they'd never existed. Even the desktop icons were missing, scattered or corrupted. And then he saw it. The new wallpaper. It wasn't just disturbing, it was unholy. A high-resolution, shockingly realistic image of Satan stretched across his screen. It wasn't cartoonish or symbolic. No, this was visceral. The figure's skin was blistered and raw, the eyes black and endless, its mouth curled into an expression that looked halfway between a sneer and a shriek. There was depth to it, as though the image had been taken from somewhere real. Father David recoiled, physically backing away from the desk. His mouth was dry, his heart pounding in his chest like it wanted to escape. He tried to change the wallpaper. Nothing happened. He clicked Internet Explorer. Nothing. Word, Excel, even the system settings, all unresponsive. It was as though something was inside the machine, actively fighting back, mocking him. And then it began. At first it was subtle, a faint, glitchy audio tone, distorted and barely audible, playing in the background. But over time, it grew clearer. It was laughter. Low, warped, and inhuman. It came at random intervals, always slightly different, sometimes echoing, sometimes whispery. Never loud, but always too close, like someone breathing just behind him. He unplugged the speakers. It didn't stop. That night, he couldn't sleep. Not because of the computer, but because every time he closed his eyes, he saw that face, that smile, heard that twisted laugh echoing in the dark corners of his mind. No trace of the email remained, no logs, no recovery option, no paper trail. To this day, no one knows how it was done. Theories swirled. A prank, a hacker with a vendetta, someone playing God with code and cruelty. But Father David, though never one to indulge in superstition, couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a hacker's joke. Because for weeks after, even with a new computer, brand new software, fresh email address, wiped drives, he still heard it. The laughter. Sometimes when everything was quiet in the church. Just for a second. Just enough to make him wonder if it had ever truly left. It was 2009 when it began, quietly, almost invisibly. A wave of emails began flooding inboxes across the world. At first glance, they looked innocent, harmless even. The subject lines were generic enough to slip past suspicion. Limited time 40% off Target coupon. Your Amazon delivery notice. Free iTunes gift card, claim inside. Millions of users clicked without hesitation. After all, they'd seen emails like these before. It was routine. But this time was different. The moment those emails were opened, it was already too late. No pop-up warning, no visible download bar, just the usual screen, and then silence. What the users didn't realize was that something had been quietly, almost surgically, embedded into their systems. A virus, sophisticated, untraceable, and terrifying in what it could do. Once inside, it began its work. It had no icon, no files in the Downloads folder, no processes visible in Task Manager. But it was watching. Every keystroke, every click, every private message, every login, every website recorded, observed. Some variations of the virus went even further. They reached through the system into the hardware itself, into the webcam, without any indicator light, without a single sign. The cameras turned on, and they began to stream. Thousands, possibly millions of people across the world went about their days, working, chatting, watching, undressing, sleeping, never knowing someone might be watching them from the other side of the screen. The idea that this was possible seemed like science fiction at the time, but it wasn't. Not this time. Cybersecurity experts scrambled. They analyzed code, traced IPs, isolated behaviors, but nothing added up. The virus was polymorphic, constantly shifting its form. Every time they got close to understanding it, it mutated, hid deeper, reached further. And the worst part, no one knew who was behind it. There were no demands, no ransom notes, no messages from some shadowy hacker group claiming responsibility. It was pure surveillance, cold, silent, just watching. And then, without warning, the swarm faded. Within a few months, the emails slowed, reports dropped off, people moved on. No one ever figured out how it started or why it stopped. Some believed the creators had tested their capabilities, perfected their tool, and pulled back just before exposure. Others thought the swarm was part of something even bigger, just a preliminary phase of a wider plan. Since then, similar waves of email-borne viruses have appeared, but none quite like that one. They've been clumsier, easier to detect, less invasive. But those who remember 2009 know the truth. It can happen again. And the worst part? If it does, you might not even know it's already begun. Because maybe right now, your inbox has a message sitting unread. One with a subject line that looks just ordinary enough. Waiting, watching, listening. The girl in this story has asked that her real name be kept private. Understandably so. Even now, the memory of what happened still leaves her shaken. For the sake of telling it, we'll call her Jen. Jen was just a freshman in high school at the time. Young, bright, and undeniably beautiful in a way that drew attention. Sometimes the kind no one ever wants. She wasn't vain. In fact, Jen was shy by nature, quiet in class, respectful, and just trying to make it through her first year like everyone else. But that didn't stop people from noticing her. Other students, teachers, strangers. And unfortunately, some who were much, much older. One day, she received an email from the Dean of Students. The subject line read, "Academic Review, please read." Inside, the message was polite, professional, even encouraging. The dean expressed concern over her recent grades, gently suggesting there was room for improvement. He offered to speak with her in person to discuss options for tutoring or support. At the bottom of the message, however, was a single odd line. "Please do not reply to this email." It seemed strange, but not alarming. Maybe it was some kind of automated system. She dismissed it, closed her laptop, and forgot about it. A week passed. Then came the second email. This one was even more direct. "Meet me at 7 a.m. tomorrow behind the school. I'd like to speak privately before classes begin. Don't be late." It was signed again with the dean's name. Jen hesitated. The message felt off, but it came from the same email address, the school's domain. She figured maybe it was something sensitive, something he didn't want to discuss in a crowded hallway. The next morning, she walked to school as usual. But instead of heading through the front entrance, she circled around the building, toward the back lot, near the dumpsters and service alley. The school grounds were empty, quiet, the kind of silence that feels a little too hollow, a little too still. And then she saw it. Someone, just barely visible, was peeking out from behind one of the dumpsters. Only their head. Their movements were jerky, hesitant, like they hadn't expected her to actually show up. It wasn't the dean. The figure wasn't dressed professionally. No suit, no badge, no clipboard. Just an older man with wild eyes and disheveled hair. And he wasn't moving toward her. He was watching her. Jen didn't wait. She turned and ran, faster than she ever had in her life, all the way home. She didn't stop until she was inside, the door locked behind her. Shaking, breathless, she told her parents everything. They didn't hesitate. The police were called. The school was notified. And that's when the truth came out. The real dean never sent those emails. Not the first one, not the second. The messages had been forged. Investigators traced the source of the emails to an anonymous web service, one designed to spoof email addresses. A site that allowed users to send emails from any address they wanted without detection. And the computer that sent them? It was located at the local public library. Farthest corner, back wall, near the printers. No cameras pointed that way. No name ever tied to the terminal. Whoever had used it had covered their tracks. And they haven't been caught. To this day, Jen avoids walking alone, especially in the early morning, especially near the back of buildings. She still receives the occasional strange email, But now she deletes them immediately. And every time she walks by a library, she wonders, was he watching her through that dumpster the whole time? And what would have happened if she'd walked a few steps closer?